then.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. This is Raise Your Voice as part of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Brett Rutherford, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Darby Robinson. We are live right now for the time being just on youtube.com/@raiseyourvoice. So if you're listening to this as a podcast, make sure to head on over to the Raise Your Voice YouTube channel. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on those notifications so you can join us every time we go live. We are working on getting back live on X on the D-Rays Bay account. I know that's where a lot of you like to listen live, but Elon changed up the rules, and as of right now, we're just live on YouTube.
If we do get back to live and we actually have to give Elon money for that, I am just going to still call it Twitter, though, as a form of silent protest. Or not so silent protest.
Yeah.
So if we're giving him money, I'm going to call it whatever I want because he will now be dancing for me.
Patreon.com/raiseyourvoice if you want to become a member. I've actually starting to percolate some ideas for our members to bring you into the Raise Your Voice community. So starting at $1 a month, you can become a member if you really want to say thank you. Darby, enough with the pleasantries. First off, I mean, how are you? One more pleasantry.
One more pleasantry? I am okay. I'm good. I'm actually good. I got back from. Thank you for holding down the fort, by the way. You and Danny.
Thank you to Danny.
I saw that. And Ian. That was a good episode too. Like it was fun to listen as a fan. I was away for 2 weeks in Greece with my wife, and it was fantastic. We did a little cruise. We saw the Parthenon. We saw the Hagia Sophia Mosque in Istanbul. We saw Santorini. We saw so many awesome things. We ate a ton of good food and drank a lot of good coffee and good booze, and it was great. I got back to work. I got a pretty gnarly cold. My voice was shot because I speak a lot for a living as well, so like both feeling sick and then speaking for like 8 hours a day in my other job, in my real job, was a lot. And so like when I was coming back and we were like, and Brett was like, you're back, let's hit it. I was like, I can barely speak at all. It would have been it would have been even more jazzy than I am right now. But you can there's a little frog still left in the throat, but it's good to be back. And we had planned tonight for this pod. And we were like, well, we'll just talk whatever, like maybe a preview of the trade deadline.
Yeah, that's what it was intended to be, a preview. We were supposed to get in front of the trades.
And why we are not behind, we are not in front of the trades. The trades are rolling over us like a steam train, choo-chooing on the way down the tracks. So we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
We have a lot to discuss. And I'm sure, and I feel like I've been seeing on Twitter some opinions and takes from Ray's Twitter. So if you have some takes, maybe a small take, I don't know, you might have some, please drop them in the comments and we will discuss it. It can be of anything. But yeah, let's riff, let's talk, let's explore this.
Well, news breaks early Friday morning. I guess if you're on the East Coast, it was still late Thursday night on the West Coast where the Seattle Mariners are, when they acquired all-star outfielder Randy Arozarena from the Rays in exchange for Brody Hopkins, a right-handed pitcher, Aiden Smith, an outfielder, and a player to be named later. Man, I mean, the Rays have, traded all-stars before to get a right-handed pitcher, an outfielder, and a player to be named later around the deadline, and it worked out pretty well. But this one, again, there really wasn't a move the Rays could make this trade deadline that would shock me. But the timing of this deal, and this being really the first major deal of this deadline week, was shocking to me. And to see Randy Arozarena go it's just jarring, right? You know, even if you expected it, It's still, a jolt to the system when it does happen. What was your initial reaction?
Oh, shock for sure. I was actually leaving work. I was late, and so I didn't get out of. I didn't get into cell service. I was out of cell service from about 5 p.m. Pacific time to about 11 p.m. Pacific time. So I'm driving home, and I turn on, I turn it off airplane mode because I don't have any cell service where I'm working, and so I start getting pings, and yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? So I think we've been talking about potential trades and potential big trades, right? I think the Rays were in a position where you felt like probably somebody from that starting core, and I think you even mentioned it a lot, like last time we talked, which was like a couple episodes back, was like one of like probably at least Randy, Paredes, Lau, or Yandy felt like they're going to be moved, and then potentially more this offseason. And so you kind of felt like the time was maybe coming to an end. This window, and we'll sort of talk about that, feels like it is closing. I think Wander going to prison, or not yet, but soon, hopefully, will be like that. That was a big, like, the window is now almost closed. And with this season, the pitchers have been hurt, but like the lineup was still there. With how long this team kind of lasted with not really being able to get any momentum together with this core lineup, you kind of felt like they probably weren't going to. Stu was not going to allow this lineup, which is the most expensive he has paid for, roll one more year.
Yeah.
With how mediocre it's been this season. So you kind of felt like, again, the screws would be tightened, that there was going to have to be some moves. And yeah, but it's still shocking, right? It's still shocking because Randy's, like, we'll talk about, I mean, I think you have to almost discuss this as a trade of like a baseball trade and then like a personality trade. Randy Arozarena, the person, is maybe the most charismatic baseball player in Major League Baseball right now. I mean, I think Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts are absolute star level players, but in terms of personality, he is right there with the biggest stars in the game, because he is an outsized personality. He interacts with the fans. Maybe there is no player that interacts with the fans more or more effectively than Randy. He is somebody that leaves a big impact and has so many big moments with the team that you really, it does seem like a bit different of a change than like some past trades. I mean, I think this goes up there with, your Evan Longoria, James Shields, David Price kind of trades when it comes to like the personality, the impact, the player is like a little bit different, like it's like that Ben Zobrist type of move. It's different than saying trading maybe even like a Blake Snell who wins you a Cy Young, but like the personality level, like it's like that, where it's like you kind of get to know these people a little bit more than just your average, like this player had all these numbers, and that's a lot to it's going to be hard to overcome, this impact. Tommy Pham gets traded, and it's like that's a big impact to fill on the roster. When Corey Dickerson was traded, it was like, this is the, you need 2.5 WAR and all this, but like there are these things where it's like when Longoria was traded, he was not even that he was a shade of his former self, and he wasn't that good in San Francisco, but it's the personality that you're missing. You're missing seeing that name. And I do think that does matter. I don't want to feel like I'm cold and callous to that, because it does matter, right? It is an entertainment business at the end of the day. And so Randy Arozarena is an entertainer. Like that is what he is. And he did a damn good job of that up until the very last day. Tonight, he did something that I've never seen any player do. I've never seen this done, where he is still in the stadium. He's in the crowd. He's sitting with his family in Randy Land in left field. He's walking around. Like when a trade happens, you get your hug watch, you get your hugs, you leave, and that's it. You don't.
I was
see the player.
so shocked. I was so shocked.
But also, But it's Randy, right? Like, so like, why should we
Yeah.
be shocked? Like, of course he's going to do that.
I'm
Of
shocked
course.
because no one else in baseball has done it, but Randy's like no one else in baseball.
Exactly.
The like I've been explaining to when the trade broke this, the news broke overnight and we woke up to it and I was with Eddie Nay and I was explaining, I was like, yeah, he's got to basically, someone will go pack up his locker and he'll fly to, Seattle. I think the Mariners are in Chicago right now. And so I was like, yeah, it happens that quickly. And then we're watching the game tonight and he's in the stands watching. And I'm like, oh, this is not normal. This is not something you usually see. And even Dwayne, like I even said, I think right before Dwayne said, I've never seen that. I said the same thing. And Dwayne's been around a little longer than I have. He's never seen anything like that either. And that was special. And I don't know how that was worked out, what his travel plans are, if he had to ask permission, but I'm really glad that it happened because it was really cool for the fans on a Friday night, a home game. It's Randy Land night. There's a sick trend of this happening where like the Rays have a giveaway or there's some event and the player is traded. This keeps happening. And
Pete Fairbanks is the bobblehead day on Sunday. I'm just saying.
And you mentioned like the personality side of this and not trying to come at this from, like this cold-hearted, like, oh, this is all right. We're going to trade Randy. We're going to get this in return and we're going to keep it churning. I implore everyone to, I believe it's on Ryan Bassett or maybe Evan Klosky's Twitter feed, posting some footage from the Eric Neander media scrum that they did in the dugout before today's game. And Eric, I mean, as always, just some really great quotes and, just kind of shares that sentiment of like, this is not fun to do, but he's got a job to do, and that's to build this team to hopefully one day win a World Series. And he feels like all the decisions they make are in pursuit of that. But this is not just some, oh, yep, Randy, he's got 2 years left of control or, a few games out of the wild card. Let's see who we can turn him into. Like, it's not just about that. However, shifting towards the baseball side of this trade, Randy we said this all offseason, right? Coming into this year, for 3 straight full seasons, Randy had proven to be the most consistent above average hitter in the Rays lineup, had stayed healthy for 3 straight full seasons, had won Rookie of the Year in 2021, was putting up around 120 WRC plus, wasn't playing great left field, but I think for those 3 years was never really like a complete liability out there. This year, maybe trending in that direction. But that brings us to this year, right? Where first 2 months of the season, he was unplayable. He really was. He was the worst player, one of the worst players in baseball that was playing every day. And we've seen him start to come around in this last 2 months. And while that made me really excited about, okay, the Rays, as they stick around in the playoff hunt, he's going to be right there hitting at his normal level. But ultimately the Rays Mariners, right, had to be Eric Neander and Jerry DiPoto making this deal late at night on a Friday or on a Thursday, heading into Friday. And he's dealt to the Mariners. What's your take on this from a baseball standpoint?
From a baseball standpoint, I just think Jerry DiPoto really blew it by not re-signing Teoscar Hernandez because he clearly wanted Teoscar Hernandez back. No, I mean, like from a baseball perspective, that is who Randy Arozarena is, right? Liability in the field, kind of a negative defender in the outfield, not unplayable, but not good. But a very steady, good, above average bat. More speed with Randy, more power for Teoscar, but the Mariners had Teoscar Hernandez. He was kind of disappointing for them in his year. He was a free agent. They don't re-sign him. And then they trade some pretty good prospect capital and to get basically a more expensive Teoscar Hernandez, while Teoscar Hernandez is seeing a fantastic rebound year with the Dodgers. So baseball trade wise for the Mariners, I think they needed a bat. They have the worst offense in baseball. They have the best pitching in baseball. They have the worst offense in baseball. That is, if you can improve your offense a little bit with that amazing pitching, you suddenly could have a really good thing. And Randy he can get as hot as anybody in any stretch of time. He also has hit quite a few home runs in T-Mobile Park. They were at the home run derby, but he has a couple in the regular season as well. So he maybe can know the sight lines. We'll see. We'll see how the actual like stadium effects to get Randy there. The biggest key, though, I think, for the Mariners side of things, it's a big impact bat. They needed to make a splash. I think they still need another bat beyond this, but I think it's worthy of like making that extra move. From the Rays perspective, again, when it comes to what Eric's doing and the front office, again, this is coming down from the top in terms of like what the payroll is going to be. What is the payroll next year? What are you being given? And his job and the front office job is to build a winner with that. It's to build a winner for 2026 and 2027 and 2028 and it's to not ever be awful. To not ever have periods where you're 2 years of completely uncompetitive baseball. We as Rays fans and as two Rays podcasters have complained ad nauseum and whined and bitched and moaned about this season where they are 500, right? Like whereas like the Pirates are having the best season ever and they're 6 games under 500 and they're thinking of even buying. Like that is a privilege take by us for sure, right? And that's the privilege that Eric Neander and his team has worked so hard to do, that this is an abominable season for us when they are playing baseball where they are winning games. They're winning every other game. And they are still in competitive. They're still 5 games back. They still have a shot, and they're going to be still playing competitive games in September. Like, I think that is the thing, is that if this is the bad part, and before that, you have year after year after year of going to the postseason and winning a division and winning an AL pennant in that rent, I think that's what you're building towards. And so I think when you look at this as a baseball move, you say, okay, we have so many dollars to spend. How do we best allocate that money for next year? How do we best replenish the depth? Because the lower minors was weak. This has probably been the thinnest minors the Rays have had in a long time. What they did was they traded again a player in Randy Arozarena. I want to take the legend status out of it, the charisma out of it. If I'm looking at the zeros and ones on the field, this is Teoscar Hernandez, who with 1 year left of control was able to net the Blue Jays Eric Swanson, who's a good, not great middle reliever. That is what a non-defensive corner outfield with potentially worsening defense and worsening speed could potentially give. And there is a non-zero possibility that Randy Arozarena goes from a consistent 3-win player to a consistent 2.5 win player. And that's a pretty big jump, because that is near platoon outfield status.
Yeah. This trade, I mean, for me, when it came to Randy Arozarena, and Eric Neander even mentioned this in that video clip, he's like, when we acquired him, it was known as the Jose Martinez trade. It wasn't the Randy Arozarena trade. And, Matthew Liberatore has, carved himself out a role as the Cardinals' long relief man over the last 3 years. So in terms of contributions from that trade,
Aiden Smith, the center fielder that from the Mariners, was there 12th on the pipeline, 11th on the Rays. Right. Randy was the Cards' 12th outfielder. So there is some parallels there.
Yeah. To me, like, this was always going to be from when Randy Arozarena came onto the scene in 2020, had one of the best, if not the best, postseason runs of all time in the history of the game. And then immediately that offseason switched his representation to Scott Boras. That for me, I knew then.
The clock was ticking.
I was like, well, this is not going to last super long. I don't know how long this will last. There was a time when he was arrested in Mexico where I didn't think he was. It
might have been one season. Yeah, it was almost one season,
one half season, like 2 months of Randy Arozarena.
Rays fans got a taste of seeing a all-star player then get in legal trouble in the offseason and then get out of it. So we were like, oh, Thank God we'll never face a star player having legal trouble in the offseason again.
That was close.
That was close. Oof. Imagine that could have been real bad.
But really, from that moment on, I think we knew eventually the Rays would have to trade Randy Arozarena, because here are your options. Randy
trade or let him walk.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Two more seasons of control after this year. So, like you said, declining defense, declining speed, some signs of declining bat speed this year. Now, especially that we can track that sort of stuff. Like early on in the season was just like whiffing on fastballs in the zone. Not a good sign. So the Rays have a choice, right? They can either keep holding on to him, which I think would have been a fine choice. And like you can make that argument that now is not the time to trade Randy. And I have no idea what returns would look like in the offseason or next trade deadline or next offseason. But Randy's price would continue to go up. He was making $8 million this year, would probably make around 12 to 15 next year, and then probably 20, if not above 20 in his final year, the way things are heading arbitration wise and the way Randy, the type of player he is. So Scott Boras was never going to let Randy Arozarena sign an extension probably with anyone, let alone with the Rays. And Randy being an older player, he was an older rookie because he had to defect from Cuba, go to Mexico, then go from Mexico to the Cardinals organization. So his career there were some blocks in there that he had to overcome, some hurdles he had to overcome. It was just never going to end in a long-term contract extension unless Randy, the only way that was going to happen is if Randy became really, or his value decreased a lot, and the Rays were like, you know what, we just want to keep him around as a DH. I just never saw that as a possibility. I thought that at some point this was going to have to be a parting of ways. And I was just shocked that now is the time that it happened. I was more expecting a trade from the big set of infielders, and maybe there will be. There's plenty of time for that to happen before Tuesday's deadline.
I have Twitter up just in case. We'll see. Things could break.
We have had breaking news.
It's been 6 hours. It's been 6 hours, so it feels like Eric's getting twitchy to trade. I think the biggest shock for me is I'm a little shocked that this is during the season. Because of the fact that I guess I'm more shocked, not so much that Eric would do this midseason, but more that like Stu would okay it in a way. Like obviously like Stu likes money. He's saving money. So like he would okay it, but like that's also like the Randyland promotions. You have all this stuff tied to him. When you have 2 years left of control, you could easily just say, let's just do this at the winter meetings. It's a little cleaner that way. I'm also, and we'll talk about this with the Zach Eflin trade, not to get ahead of ourselves. I think the other surprising thing is just the return, which I like the return. I'm a little surprised at the level that the return is at, and the fact that there isn't that like extra piece for now, right? Like in these trades. So that is the part I think that is the most shocking, is that it was in the season trade, and that there isn't that like, I don't know, Dominic Canzone throw in, right? Where it's like, not an impactful player, but like, oh, that's the person that's going to play. And you're like, oh, he's a lefty. Dominic Canzone is a lefty. Johnny DeLuca is a righty. There's your platoon. Bingo bongo. They're now a Voltron that equals Randy, right? If you platoon both of those guys, they're WRC plus. Johnny DeLuca versus lefty and Dominic Canzone versus righty is, that's like the Rays way, right? Is you trade your star, you get like a okay piece for now that you can utilize, and then the big piece later. David Price, you get Drew Smiley, who can be your back end starter, plus Willie Adames for later. That's usually the case. The fact that it wasn't in this case is a little surprising, right? It's two guys plus a player to be named later. But we know with the new player to be named later rules, it's not a 40-man roster person. It's not an injured list person. And it's not a draft pick. So basically, we know these are people that are probably far away. And the two that they got, Brody Hopkins and Aiden Smith, are single A players right now. So they are 2026 at the earliest type of guys. So that's the part that's a little surprising.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk a little bit about the return. Brody Hopkins. Um, so interesting. Older pitcher for that level, was drafted out of the College of Charleston. Having a lot of success this year at that level. Really low arm slot for a right-handed pitcher, and
Yeah.
delivery wise reminds some people of like a right-handed version of a Chris Sale. That's not
Or
a, it's not a,
Tan Houck kind of.
or Tanner
Yeah.
Houck. So very low, awkward arm slot. My biggest worry is just from that arm slot is health, right? Is keeping that arm healthy with the starting pitcher's workload. But if the Rays, think this guy can be a starter, I believe them. I believe they will work with him and tweak him, or maybe not. Maybe he's got it going on right now. And I think the Rays do probably need to get him into Double-A. I think he's 23 years old. It's probably time for him to make that jump, especially if you are going to view him as one of your top pitching prospects, because we talk about it getting thin in the minor leagues. The pitching prospects at the truly high end, and I don't even know if Hopkins is in that truly up. He's not a top 100 guy, at least not yet. The Rays don't have many of those. I mean, with Boss and Bradley now firmly in the big leagues, it's getting thin down there.
I think the thing with Hopkins that's really interesting, and I will say with this, the caution with the Randy trade, and I saw a lot of this out there. A lot of people using the MLB pipeline rankings. That's not a public rankings are fun. We like them. They are not indicative of internal rankings in baseball. That like just straight up. Teams are running, and we know this by a lot of examples, but internal rankings can vary quite dramatically from a lot of the external rankings. Not to say anything bad about like Pat Mayo or anybody that does, anybody from Baseball America or Fangraphs, Eric Longenhagen and Kylie McDaniel with ESPN. All these guys do tons of great work. And I don't think that they I don't mean to take them down at all, but they will even admit that internal rankings from teams can vary quite a bit. And they have access to stuff that they don't have access to. So I think just saying the Rays didn't get a top 100 guy for some of these guys, especially using the pipeline rankings, they have not been updated yet for the midseason. That usually comes in August, kind of post trade deadline. These are two guys that are actually quite helium heavy. They have kind of rocket ships. Aiden Smith is having a breakout year. We'll talk about him next, but Brody Hopkins, especially kind of a new convert to pitching a little bit, very athletic. But all of the numbers, Lance Brzdowski, who is a fantastic follow if you don't on Twitter, amazing kind of pitching, development guy, works for was it Marquee? So he's on the Cubs broadcast a lot. He kind of breaks down Hopkins, the different pitch shapes, the release points, the amount of ride he's getting, all of that stuff. A lot of big numbers, but basically, if you look at if you're into really nerd heavy pitching, it's all eye popping. It's legit some of the most exciting stuff that's immediately into the Rays organization. He has enough pitch shapes that he can be a starter. Health and stamina and all that, and effectiveness will be the big thing. But this is a guy that has potentially frontline starter ceiling. He also has a pretty big reliever floor. There is a pretty wide gulf of outcomes that he could turn into. But that is kind of exciting. That is a really high end guy who I think will shoot up a lot of charts. Mm-hmm. He is somebody that I think Fangraphs had him at 7th on the Mariners list. I think MLB Pipeline updated to something like 7th on the Rays top 10. He is somebody that I think can really shoot up charts, especially depending upon whether you see him as starting potential or just relief. But the arm is very, very interesting. So I think the two guys, Aiden Smith as well, has been on an absolute heater. Again, in low A, fresh draft pick as of last year. I think there's a huge, huge ceiling for both of those guys. But I do think there is I think it's fair to be a little surprised that there isn't anything for the Modern at this time. But that's the other thing the Rays do, right? Is that these first two trades can be for replenishing the lower half. There could be a trade of somebody that is a higher prospect that goes for a Modern, like a plug and play outfielder or something like that. So I do think we kind of, at the end of this show, it's still basically, I can't evaluate fully what the Rays are doing until we get to our next show after the trade deadline, because there could be a lot of moves here. The other bit of stat I just want to just post again for the other guy, Aiden Smith, 2 prospects, Big Bob's Cards on Twitter kind of posted this, which is kind of a cool little cute query. Anytime you kind of get 4 or more like data points, it can sometimes feel a little bit like you're just trying to get to an endpoint, but there are pretty good data points. So age 20 or younger, over 200 plate appearances, above rookie ball, and a batting average above 275, an ISO above 185, and a WOBA above 400. So weighted on base average above 400. There's 2 players that fit this criteria in 2024. One is Aiden Smith. The other is Xavier Isaac. Aiden Smith plays a pretty true center field with 5 tools. That's exciting. That's an exciting bat. Now, he is very early on his journey. But that's a guy that can go from being 11th or 12th, like Randy was, to suddenly next year, he's back in top 100. And by the midseason, he's pushing even higher.
And the Rays don't typically go out to acquire those like guys that are already top 100 prospects. One, because they're really hard to acquire. They're incredibly valuable players to have in your system. But the Rays do look for players with specific tools that they can maybe get into their, system and work with their coaches and try out some different things. So there's also a player to be named later in this trade. We don't know who it is. It sounds like it's it might not be the biggest piece in this trade, but it was significant in getting this deal to the finish line. And we might not know who that player to be named later is until after the season. But we do know that it cannot be someone that was drafted this year, and it cannot be anyone on the 40-man roster. Is that correct?
Those are the new rules. Yeah.
Okay.
So switch pitcher that the Mariners took in the first round, very Raysy, not going to be the guy. Matt Brash, 60-day IL, probably not going to be him because he was on the roster. And not Julio Rodriguez, for instance. So get that buying low on Julio with his 600 OPS. It's not going to be that. So so not on the roster. It's also not going to be Ty France because you can get him for probably free.
Free. I don't think he really fits.
And I think the Rays will also pass on that price.
Yeah.
But no, overall, I will say before we move on to the Zach Eflin trade, I think this is one that the Randy feels of not having a Arozarena on this team. And when he plays for the Mariners, when he suits up for the Mariners tomorrow, I think on Saturday, it's going to feel weird. It's going to feel like a bit of a dagger. And I get that. I do think though, overall, this is from a baseball trade, on the field trade, I think the Rays did a pretty good job. This is not a fleece. I know a lot of people are saying fleece because it's not, they didn't get Harry Ford. They didn't get the top, but they were never, I think the trade value, we've talked about this with Randy Arozarena, is tough because the trade value of Randy Arozarena as a player is that of Teoscar Hernandez, but the star power of a Shohei Ohtani. And those were always going to be hard to match up, which is where I thought maybe they weren't going to be able to do a trade, because if you're only offering so much, I do think this is one of those trades where these 2 pieces plus the player to be named later, that third piece, it is very possible that in the winter, one of those guys plus the player to be named later is the offer instead of both. Or you pick a second. I think there is a real chance that, and you can say I still don't care. These are low A ball players. They may never do anything. We may never even hear from them again. They're coming up in 2 to 3 years. But then that's fine, right? You know it, Randy Arozarena, you know what he can do now. But I do think there's a difference between saying like the Rays could have gotten this offer in the offseason. I don't think they could have. If they could have, Eric does it in the offseason. I think that's the big where we should not like interfere with that. Like I don't think
I
that's where
hear
we
that.
speculate.
I think like if I'm going to argue the other side, because I go back and forth on this, and like you, I want to wait to see what all of the moves that are made are before I draw any conclusions. And even then, you know, none of these trades, like we don't know who will win these trades for years.
Yes,
that's how this works. But the argument for, you know, let's say in this hypothetical situation that, you know, you get Hopkins plus the player to be named later, or you get Aiden Smith and the player to be named later in the offseason, you are still getting the rest of the year of Randy Arozarena at, you know, with like the $3 million left on his $8 million salary this year. And for me, and again, we don't know this yet, but all week the chatter was the Rays are going to be buyers and sellers. They were, you know, you would read every article of like, this is what each team is going to do at the deadline. And there were buyers, there were sellers, and then there were the Rays. And they made 3 trades today. We're really going to talk about 2.
They bought. They added a
Sulser.
former major leaguer. Yeah.
A former Ray. He's back.
Former Ray. Bringing him home. We're bringing him home.
But to see Arozarena and then Eflin be traded on the same day, and not even no big league pieces, but not even a AAA piece that is maybe big league ready in either of the returns, to me, and there's still time left, but to see both of these moves happen in the same day on a Friday going into the weekend, I'm starting to think that maybe for the first time in a long time, the Rays will be what you would classify as sellers at this deadline. Now that does not mean they're punting on this season, although it feel like right now I feel like they kind of are, or they're at least they're not going all in. They never were going to go all in.
No.
But yeah, I guess I'm a little bummed because I thought if the Rays are going to get back in this thing and they're going to have success and they're going to make another pennant run this year, they're going to need Randy Arozarena in their lineup. And it was so exciting watching him heat up these last few weeks and coming out of the All-Star break and having a multi-homer game and in really solidifying himself back in the middle of this lineup. I was really pumped about that. And then you go to sleep last night and I wake up and he's been traded and you're going into a really important series. You thought, you know, again, I was maybe preparing for one of the infielders. And with the infielders, in terms of lineup, there's a more obvious replacement. And well, you've got Curtis Mead, and then you also have Junior Caminero. The outfield, it is a little more shaky right now if you're going to run a DeLuca Palacios platoon out and left. I don't think it's a bad thing. But again, you had Randy Arozarena, a consistently above average big league bat that you could plug in every day in the lineup. And so to see that, and then we're moving on to the Zach Eflin trade, which was more expected. I didn't really see anyone grumble about this. Zach Eflin, though, was the Rays' largest free agent signing ever 2 years ago. 3-year, $40 million contract, backloaded. Again, we kind of knew when he would be traded. This was not a matter of when or if. We knew exactly either now or in the offseason, Zach Eflin would probably be traded.
Honestly, though, that if you really look at that Zach Eflin signing, what a great signing, right?
Yeah.
Because at the time, I think people thought that's a really dumb signing. Like Zach Eflin was a back end starter who wasn't that healthy, not that successful, solid, but like really 40 million him. But it was great because he grew up a Rays fan. He grew up in the area. He was a local kid. He came back, got the opening day start this year. Like those are exciting stuff. And he definitely was not as good this year as he was last year. Last year he was amazing. He was an absolutely he was top 10 AL starter. Like that was awesome. But this was definitely a step back, a little bit of a regression. He has still done, gotten a lot of like solid inning churn where he is maybe 2-3 runs, really solid middle of the rotation arm. But yeah, I think when you look at his contract and you look at ways, if Stu is saying this payroll can't go 100 million next year, we got to drop it down back to like 75. you're looking at that 18 million he's offered in the offseason, and you go, that is definitely not sticking around on this roster, especially not with, again, like Shane Boz returns. Jeffrey Springs is basically ready to come back. And you kind of need to get them, like, there's an interesting, this year's team is very interesting in a lot of ways, because they kind of need to have players play who may not be all the way there yet, but you also, if you don't play them, you are hurting next year. You're setting yourself up worse for next year. But like Jeffrey Springs and Shane Boz may not be as sharp as if you kept, say, Zach Eflin or maybe even Aaron Savale. But you really want Jeffrey Springs and Shane Boz to get back healthy and kick off all of the rust this year, so that next year they are like exactly what happened with Tyler Glasnow. He came back, was a little shaky, still good, but not like maybe the perfect, angel Messiah. And now this year he's like really, really strong. And I think that's the thing, is like you kind of want to see that rust. So you need to have spots in the rotation. And Zach Eflin just made the most sense as a trade. Pretty shocking that it was in division.
Right.
That's pretty shocking. It's to the Orioles and not the Red Sox or Yankees. So that does feel like a little better. I don't know. I don't know about you, but to me, that's like a little less.
It is.
It's less of a sting. It's less of a sting.
It is. And it's like, I don't know. I don't think the Rays care as much about like the taboo of in-division trading. I think if someone meets their valuation, if they were like in the division race, I mean, they probably wouldn't be trading Zach Eflin, but like if they were neck and neck with Baltimore, although they did trade Randy to a team there, right there in the wild card race with.
Technically, yes. Yeah.
I think it's different, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think the Rays feel like, man, if we do scrape into the postseason and we have to face Zach Eflin, I don't think like that's like, no. He's a great pitcher, right? But he's not that. You're not trading Tyler Glasnow to then face you in the postseason.
The Texas Rangers didn't seem to be all that phased last year. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
I don't want. So, that's mean. That's mean. They're the World Series champs. They weren't all that phased by Tyler Glasnow either. Let's be honest. Like they were not phased. No, I do think it's an interesting move for Baltimore. Baltimore is at a very interesting crossroads, and they have been really struggling, as well as the Yankees. They both have basically come out of the All-Star break, and both teams have just decided to like have a lose off to see like who's gonna decide to kick it back on. There was a lot of talk that the Orioles, there's a lot of smoke around Garrett Crochet and Tarek Skubal. But I do think that Baltimore Orioles are in this weird spot where they have all of these treasures from tanking, from unabashedly bastardizing the game by tanking and not trying for several years. Some might call it an affront to baseball. I don't know. Do I call it that? Maybe. But they tanked. They did it. They caused their fans to enjoy some 50, 60 win seasons. And now they have a parade of dry whites in their wine cabinet that peppers the BA top 100. But they are also in the spot where they have a really good major league roster. And some of those are those prospects. But then you also have all of these guys who kind of fit roles that can't break through. And do you trade them or do you keep them? Do you make that move? Do you trade a Jackson Holiday for Tarek Skubal, who could win the Cy Young this year, who is maybe the best pitcher in baseball this year? Or do you go to Garrett Crochet and maybe trade a Kobe Mayo and a couple other of your top 5, top 10 guys? Or do you go like, okay, we're not going to go a number 1 ace like Cy Young starter, and we're not going to go the breakout number 2 starter in Garrett Crochet, maybe a solid 3-4 kind of guy to like kind of fill out our rotation, get some innings, and like be a solid guy behind Burns and kind of fill out our rotation, like give us some more depth in that rotation. and trade in that like 10 to 20 range. And that's what they did. So it's some really good prospects coming back. I think Mac Horvath is like probably the most exciting of those names, though Jackson Baumeister, wasn't he a Florida State guy? Isn't he?
He was.
Is that should we? What do you think of getting a Seminole?
I'm very happy to get another Florida State player. I really like the fastball. He's got a big curveball with a lot of depth to it. I remember him being maybe not living up to his full potential at Florida State and being on some not so good Florida State teams. He wasn't there for the full resurgence under Link Jarrett this year. He was there during the Mike Martin Jr. days. And so I'm excited to get a Noel. I think he's an interesting player. Mac Horvath, though, is the one in this deal who I think is intriguing. He's 23 years old, and again, playing at high A. So maybe he just turned 23 this month, though. So he's not too old. He's about right for that league, that age, that level of the minor leagues. Draws his fair share of walks. I think has some sneaky power in that bat. He's hit 9 home runs this year in 317 plate appearances. The hit tool is a little questionable. He is hitting 232 right now in high A, but does have over 11% walk rate and a 417 slugging. So the speed is there. Again, kind of just a toolsy player, right? Can play maybe in a few different spots and has that raw power that, like, again, I think I trust the Rays and their development and their coaching staff to get that guy up to speed. Matthew Etzel was the other part of that trade, has hit at every level of the minor leagues. Again, draws a good amount of walks. He is an outfielder, left-handed hitting outfielder, age 22 and in Double-A this season. So again, I think there's the Rays, they are going, I think, more for quantity. I think this is like an opportunity for them to truly restock their farm system to get to even half of what it was, 3-4 years ago. But that's not to say that they did so at the full expense of quality, because I think there's lots of quality. The high-end top 100 guys aren't there, but you weren't trading the players that it would require to get those top 100 guys. You've got Randy Arozarena, who we talked about. Then you look at Zach Eflin with a year left, is above average pitcher, but not elite. He had a really good year last year, but hasn't shown that he is an elite all-star level pitcher like a Garrett Crochet or a Tarek Skubal. So you take a step back. There is quantity, but I think there's quality here as well. So again, it's not just, we'll take as many guys as we can get. I think these guys were probably carefully handpicked by the Rays, and they each have something in their game that the Rays really enjoy and want to work with.
Well, and that because I think there was no shortage of teams that could add a Randy Arozarena and no shortage of teams that would add a Zach Eflin. So I don't think like again, like there is no pressure to be like, you need to move these guys right this instant. It's more, this is maybe the best opportunity to cash out on these guys. If you're going to move them in the offseason, is this the opportunity? And you have a selection of potential options. So this is where one of those things where it's like, we don't know. And I would, when it comes down to judge it, like, who am I giving the benefit of the doubt to? Am I going to say like, well, these guys you should get a top 100 guy for Zach Eflin because pitchers are going to be extremely expensive on the deadline. I'm going to probably trust Eric Neander in the Rays front office that they didn't just go like, oh my God, if I just waited one more day, Jackson Holiday, I could have pried Samuel Bolacero out of there. I'm like, that's I think where it's like, I think the interesting thing was with the quantity is there, but I also think there is a bit more quality than the 3-for-1 type of deals that these normally are, because of the fact that they took further away. So there's like a weird mix, right? Is like, could you have traded Zach Eflin for Herstad? Probably not, maybe, but like 1-for-1, maybe. But like, or do you go for, or a Connor Norby, right? Do you trade him for Connor Norby, who's at AAA, who is not Kobe Mayo? He's like their third or fourth best middle infield prospect, who's still a top 10 guy and a top 100 guy? Or do you go with quantity, but not necessarily double and triple A quantity, like a bunch of kind of, like solid platoon guys? Or do you go quantity and quality of but way far away, where
Right.
there's a lot of outcomes? A lot of the wheel of outcomes is they never make it above double A. Right. And that's the risk. And so I think for the teams trading for these proven content, I think it's a fair trade, because you're saying for some of these GMs, am I going to be around when these guys break through? For Jerry DiPoto, probably not. Right. If he can't do anything soon, he's not going to be here in 2026 or 2027 when Aiden Smith is making him look stupid. I think that's a really important part of this is whatever. I get Randy Arozarena now. I get to add an all-star level player, a name that people know, and maybe can spark my offense, who just needs a run or two to get Logan Gilbert and Kirby and Castillo a win. They're just can you just throw one random cheap home run and I can get a win here? I'm dying 0-2. So I do think this is one of those interesting, it's not just quantity of these are maybe major league role players. It's not the high quality of this is a potential star MLB player right now, or next year, but it is some interesting quality and quantity by assuming quite a bit of risk, spreading it out a bit over the course of 6 players, but it's assuming quite a bit of risk, because when you're that far away, there's a lot of outcomes. There's a lot of peaks. There's a lot of valleys that you can hit.
Yeah. The timing of the Eflin trade, I think I was a little more shocked that I was anticipating, just Crochet to go off the board first, because I do think he'll be moved. Skubal, it feels like there's smoke there, but Skubal would take a lot to move. And I thought maybe the Rays would try to wait it out, and then teams that either missed out on Crochet or Skubal, or come to find out those guys weren't going to be available, then turn to Eflin, and maybe you're getting a little desperate. But the longer you let it play out to the deadline, teams might just become disinterested. I don't think there's many GMs out there anymore that are going to get that desperate and then plunge the prospects up to get Zach Eflin at 458 before the deadline. I don't think he's that level of pitcher where there would be that level of desperation where all of a sudden, now you're getting the Glasnow, Meadows, Boz return. You'll never get that again. That was a one-time thing, guys. But overall, I'm happy, I think, with the Eflin return. Again, I'm a little worried about the pitching, right? We've got Jeffrey Springs coming back. Drew Rasmussen is slowly working his way back. They can still make more moves with the pitching. Maybe Zach Littell is available. Maybe they look to bring in a young arm that could start some games. I think the trades that were made today do make the 2024 Rays worse off, even if marginally so, which is a little bit of a bummer, because they've been winning series. It feels like they've been doing everything they need to do, but the hole they dug themselves into in the first couple months might just be too deep, and the other teams in the American League are talented enough to maintain that lead over them, and it just might not be the year for the Rays. But I was hoping, the optimist in me was hoping that, man, if we keep Randy, let's keep Eflin, we could deal Littell or someone else and really kind of keep this thing moving and go for it, just try to get into the dance. That's the Rays' goal every year, right? It's not to, it's to win a World Series, but to win a World Series, you got to be in the postseason. You got to make the tournament, right? So that's a little bit of a bummer. But again, we're waiting, right? Maybe Lars Nootbaar is coming to the Rays in 48 hours. I don't know. I doubt it. I think you would needed to have moved Zach Eflin. I don't know, I don't think they want Yandy Diaz. Where do you play him, right? So I'm hoping that the Rays make it, because you can acquire young major league talent that helps you in 2024, but also helps you in 2025, right? When the Rays acquire Tommy Pham, it was to help them in 2018, but he was their best hitter in 2019. So it doesn't have to be someone that's coming in we're buying for right now. You're definitely not going after rentals at this time. I would love to see major league talent or guys that are in AAA that have had some experience or knocking on the door that can come up and maybe give this team a positive boost.
Well, that's the interesting thing that I want to talk about here is these trades all added. I think that's the interesting thing, right? So the players added when it comes to ETAs, they are all 2026 or 2027. Right? Like that's pretty much all the players they added were 2026, 2027. So a couple of years down the road. So not next year, but the year after.
Mm-hmm.
If the Rays do not add, if they do more trades, which they will, and they do not add any players like above the AA level, that is an interesting change, right? That is dramatically different than what we were seeing. And that does almost suggest to me a change in window that's saying like 2025 is going to be much like 2024, which is a maybe transition year where you maybe are not like not competing. You're not tanking, but you're not necessarily expecting to make the postseason. If you hit some like good luck and, you know, like Caminero hits the ground running and Josh Lowe bounces back a lot and like, you know, like that type of thing, like you could, and the pitching is like dominant, right? You can see like, oh, we might get a playoff run, but it's more 2018 than it is 2019. It's more 2007 than it is 2008. It's more that like, I guess that's my question to you is like, do you think these moves right now are signaling they want the window to be the year before the stadium opening and beyond? Because like 2026 is here comes the next wave. Because if you look at okay, of the top five, you have Caminero, whose ETA is basically now or next year, Carson Williams next year, Xavier Isaac 2026, Braden Taylor 2026, Dominic Keegan 2025, 2026. Like it's starting to look like end of next year into 2026.
I think it's closing the window. There's still some of the core that's been there for the postseason years that will continue into next year. But I truly think it's the window's open next year. I mean, like you said, Caminero, he'll be up in the big leagues next year. I mean, he could be up in a few days. He'll definitely be an everyday player come next year. The pitching you've got, Shane McClanahan's still there, guys. Like Taj Bradley, and again, Shane's coming off a second Tommy John. But the pitch, Shane Baz, you know, even if he is more of a back end rotation guy, like sign me up for that. If Shane Baz is your 4 or your 5 starter. Ryan Pepio, once he gets his knee infection figured out.
Train that knee.
The window is there. Yeah, the window is opening again in 2025, and it might peak in 26, 27, 28 when Williams is a full-time big leaguer and Xavier Isaac is up here, and you know Chandler Simpson is stealing 100 bags. But I think we don't have to wait. This isn't a rebuild again. This is a retooling. This is not first and foremost, but this was an effort to cut payroll. That is one of the motivating factors. Stu said it right at the beginning of the year. Yeah, we're running out a really high payroll. Really hope it works. And all of this, you know, Wander Franco not being there and not being part of this team kind of changed, I think, everyone's plans. Nobody expected. Yeah. You know, everyone is expecting him to be in the middle of the, hitting second or third playing shortstop this year. And so, yes, is 2024 not going to be our year? It doesn't look like it. I think 2025, there's a lot to look forward to. I don't feel like we're kicking the can down the road here at all.
I agree. I just wanted to set you up for that to see what you would say, because I agree that what you're seeing is there is a wave coming, but there is quite a bit to like in the right now, right? Like you have a lot to like, and that pitching, you don't need a lot of offense with what that pitching can provide. So I do think they're set up nicely to potentially take a big step forward. And I do think this is, you know, not a bad time to do a retool. Like I think this is a core that you might feel sad that it's ending, but like this is a team, this core did had a really fun run from about 2018 to now. And some of those pieces, you know, Randy comes about in 2020. You get an AL pennant, you get a 100-win team, you get a 99-win team, you get some division wins, you go to the postseason. You have, you know, 3 straight years of really disappointing postseason exits. You do some buying, you trade Joe Ryan, you trade Kyle Manzardo for you buy at the deadline and they don't work out. You do these moves because this was a good core, and I don't think that's it's not for nothing, right? We got a lot of fun and entertainment out of this core, but I also think like things don't last forever, and you do have to start thinking about the next core, the next wave, and not have to suddenly have it hit a wall where you then are kind of have nothing in the cupboard. You didn't succeed in the small sample size postseason, and now you have a couple of years where you are having to rebuild everything. This is a potential opportunity to take the medicine now and then kind of bounce back. And I do think that is something to this, where when you are always playing for the now and the future, I think they pushed a few chips. They could have pushed more, but they pushed a few chips for this core. But you saw those postseason ends. You know, you saw 3 straight years, with the last 2 being like kind of the most disappointing, where the offense couldn't score and the pitching wasn't sharp enough. Like, I think what you saw was maybe like this core may not be able to get that next level. They may not have been a piece or 2 away. You may not have been able to trade Chandler Simpson or Carson Williams for Garrett Crochet to like take you over the top or something like that, right? Like,
yeah,
I think like that, like a package centered around that maybe doesn't take this team from where it is now to being like, we're going to take out the Orioles or the Yankees.
And let me say this: I think the amount of money that they're getting off the books, including hopefully Wander Franco at some point, right, is going to allow them to maybe pursue contract extensions with other young players and get back into the free agency. Like we saw them go out and sign Charlie Morton and then sign Zach Eflin. And, you know, they're going to have some more of that money available to think, okay, where do we need to improve this team with free agency? The Rays are not afraid to spend money. They're very selective about when they spend their money. You know, we've heard about the big offers to Freddie Freeman and then to Aaron Judge. So, hey, Juan Soto, why not? Come on down. The Rays will, you know, all they can do is make an offer, right? And then it's up to Juan Soto to decide.
At the very least, they'll make somebody else pay more.
That's right. So
can't get them for free.
While I say like they are cutting payroll, I think they're cutting so much that they're going to have to spend a little bit more money. And, you know, certain guys are entering arbitration and different things. Like, there is the potential to add to this team this offseason.
And I do think, and like, listen, you can say like, I'll believe it when I see it. Because sure, believe it when you see it. Don't take my word for it. Why would you take my word for it? But I do think there is a long history of brand new stadium, new money, right? Like new influx. And I do think that is, Eric Neander kind of mentioned that today a little bit. He sort of said, like, you know, knock on wood, like, it would be nice to have more money to, like, you know, play with, to try to do the things that I'm trying to do to compete. And he said something like, knock on wood, hopefully soon that will be the case as we kind of figure out the stadium. And so, like, I do think there is something there to, like, potentially he was told, like, when he signed this big extension, that, like, here is the plan. Here is the long-term plan, is right now the payroll is going to be $75 million because the economics haven't changed. Right.
And we're building a stadium
for better or worse. And like, you can also say like Stu Sternberg's lying. He like has more money. You can do all that. Fine. Like, I'm not going to argue that point's been well covered, and I'm not going to stand and defend owners. They have plenty of money. They can defend themselves. The key is, this is what they have said is their payroll is $75 million with a rolling basis. This goes up a little bit more because they were down a little bit less. And that's been mostly true in terms of like what they've said and how they've acted. The economy of the stadium has not changed. The attendance has not changed. So those things I would not expect. The TV deal has not changed. So you're not seeing that like, oh, they should get a lot more money. The revenue sharing has changed a little bit. Maybe that's allowed them to go up to 100 million. I don't know. Overall, basically, the economics of what they claim they can pay and what they have shown they've paid matches up. So for whatever, that is what Eric is being given, right? So that's what he has to work under. That's what Neander and his team are doing.
Mm-hmm.
So if he is resigning and he is maybe talking about this, maybe there is a long-term saying like, here's what your economics are now. When the stadium is finally done, we expect to see, you know, a percentage increase here. And that will mean we are going to try to spend X number of dollars per payroll. And so when you come to that, you do think maybe like if you are retooling, you want to have the money to re-sign Junior Caminero. And who could be the next face of the franchise is maybe it's Caminero, maybe it's Carson Williams, maybe it's Xavier Isaac, all guys who are going to be potentially debuting and coming forward. Maybe it's Taj Bradley, you know, people that you can maybe say like these are young 20s guys who will be there in their primes when you are hopefully opening a brand new stadium and you maybe want to have a different kind of era of Rays baseball where you have a couple people that you are your core. You originally thought it was going to be Wander, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the plan. They signed him to the deal. He was going to be the guy that you could safely get a jersey. He was going to be the guy that you had for 12, 15 years. That was it. Shit happens, right? That is one of the biggest what ifs now in Tampa Bay sports history.
That's the way it goes, really.
In baseball history, right? This is insane, right? So we are basically moving on, and you are seeing now like what the next wave is. And yeah, who knows? We'll see what, you know, we'll believe it when we see it, when they actually start spending money and re-signing multiple players. But you do have to be, you can't say like everybody is a face of the franchise. You can't sign everybody to the long term, because I also think there is a very, very fans want to see star players stay with their team and win. People do not want to see star players be faded stars, not play that well, and the team lose. And there is a very difficult judgment call to see who you keep, how long you keep it, and where's the balance between fans want to see this player, but they don't want to see him if you're an 80-win team. They don't want to see a diminished Randy on an 80-win team. They want to see 2020 Randy on a 95-win team. And what's the level of wins? What's the level of performance? Where does those match up? And so it's very easy to say you want to see, you know, prime 22 to 27-year-old Evan Longoria. Like I'd want to see that for 15 years. I would have loved to have seen Tim Lincecum in his prime for 20 years. That doesn't happen. That's not the way the baseball gods work sometimes. So,
and the players that do are Hall of Famers, and they get locked up.
Yes.
And when the Rays think they have them, they sign them to really long contract extensions.
And then they do get locked up.
Yeah, like even Longoria, right? Like when he was coming up at the level in the early years, like this is a potential Hall of Fame level player, and you know it's about doing it well into your 30s, which is really hard to do.
It is.
Father Time is undefeated, and so. Yeah, it's a balancing act, but I think we've covered pretty much everything. Cole Sulser was acquired for cash considerations and option to AAA Durham for anybody.
We do not have a 20 minutes on Cole Sulser.
Oh, I did. Did you not have your notes prepared?
Oh, okay. Well, that could be a bonus episode. That's for the Patreon.
I don't want to lose Patreon members by doing a Cole Sulser episode.
You have to be endured to hearing about Cole Sulser for 20 minutes. I do want to say before we log off, I just want to say like the MLB pipeline kind of updated a little bit, and it does feel like they have a little sneaky, I think, midseason update that they slipped in there. Not all the way, they're not doing the whole thing, but they did move Brody Hopkins up quite a bit from where they put him in the Mariners list. I know the Mariners have a little different prospect rankings, obviously, but like they jumped from 22 to on the Rays 6th. So I just want to list the prospects that the Rays acquired in these two trades and where they rank in their new top 30. Brody Hopkins comes in at number 6. Then you have Aiden Smith at number 12. So those are the two of the three from the Randy Arozarena trade. Jackson Baumeister comes in at number 13. Mac Horvath, number 18. And then Matthew Etzel, number 27. So all on the top 30. Also, Gregory Barrios is number 23, which was from the Aaron Savali trade. So that is 6 new top 30 prospects added with those 3 trades.
Yeah.
That is restocking. They are again, like I said, like in terms of how far away they are 2 years away in ETA at least. So 2 to 3 years, but that is restocking the cupboard, right? That is restocking the cupboard that was getting a little bare. And so that's trading Aaron Savali. That's trade. I mean, you traded a big prospect for Aaron Savali, but you're still getting a top 30 guy back for him, even after like a year and a half of pretty depressed value, or a year of depressed value. You're trading Zach Eflin, with a year and a half left. You're getting 3 pieces back in your top 30. You're trading Randy Arozarena. You're getting top 10 in your own organizational lineup who has some helium, and another guy just outside of the top 10. This is a restocking. This is a retooling.
Right. Yeah. And overall, like, we will talk about it after the trade deadline. We'll probably need a couple weeks after that to process it and really kind of take a look at the Rays plans and what this team is going to look like for the rest of this year and going into next year. So great episode. I think we've covered everything, and man, I mean, we're probably gonna, if we ended the show right now, this time yesterday, Randy Arozarena, the trade news is not broken yet. So who knows? We could hop off and there'd be a new deal done. We could see a Mark Topkin or a Ken Rosenthal or a Jeff Passan tweet. But I don't know. I think maybe they'll give us the night off. But that is going to do it for this week's episode of Raise Your Voice. Thank you guys for listening. And thank you to those of you who joined us on youtube.com/RaiseYourVoice. If you are on YouTube and you haven't already, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on that notification bell so you can join us every time we go live. Also, if you really want to say thank you, patreon.com/RaiseYourVoice, where you can become a member for as little as $1 a month. We're also available wherever you get your podcasts. You can leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. That's the best way to spread what we do to more and more Rays fans. As always, make sure to head on over to theraysbay.com to check out all of that great Rays content. Darby, I'll talk to you later. And once again, thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you next week.